Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of PW Grocer's Environmental Echo. I'm Paul Boyce, your host and CEO and president of PW Grocer Consulting. And today, as always, we're bringing an exciting topic and guest from TRITEC Real Estate Company in East Setauket. We've got Chris Kelly, a vice president of marketing there. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, this is exactly what our listeners need to hear. You know, what's going on Long Island, and we try to be, up to date and current with the topics, and I think we're going to cover that today. But before we begin, I do want to just say the best way to get a hold of us is through our website. If our listeners have any questions, comments, suggestions, thoughts, ideas, yada, 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 all that stuff, topics for guests, anything like that, reach out to us through our website, which is www.pwgrocer.com/podcast. Again, we've got our marketing guys there are always on top of it and looking forward to responding to people. But to begin, as I said, Chris Kelly, Vice President of Marketing at TRITEC out of East Setauket, New York-based development firm known for its transit-oriented developments across the island and elsewhere. TRITEC was founded in 1986 by brothers Bob and Jim Coughlin, right?
Yep.
Terrific guys. I'd love to get them on the show one of these days, but we'll see. And TRITEC has grown steadily in terms of size and influence. Chris joined the firm back in 2004, which is, oh my God, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Time is flying. And he's played an integral role in the development of the TRITEC brand and the company as a whole. TRITEC's probably best known for the new village development here in Long Island, which is in the village of Patchogue. TRITEC is building two new transient-oriented projects at a 1,450-unit complex in Ronkonkoma, known as the Station Yards.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I've seen that thing going up. And also, I know we've got the 418-unit complex known as Shoregate in downtown Bayshore,
right,
also in progress, right?
Yep. We are getting ready to welcome residents November 15th.
Holy cow, I didn't realize you guys were that far along. But again, I just want to welcome Chris. Thanks for joining us. So let's get started. All right.
Sounds great.
At PWGC, our company, you guys, we've worked with you guys before. Our focus is on improving the environment through environmental engineering and remediation. That's tried and true. That's what we do. But we've noticed on your website that TRITEC utilizes sustainable strategies in its approach to projects. Can you give us a couple of examples as to the application of these strategies?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I would say a project we did together, the shipyard in Port Jefferson, there was a creek that bisected the property, and we had to do a lot of engineering to figure out how to get cars around the creek. We had to maintain there's a lot of flooding that happens in downtown Port Jeff.
Absolutely.
So the creek was a big part of figuring out how we can do underground parking and the residents above while not having any issues with water. And we haven't in 5 years, so great job on the engineering.
God, yeah, well, knock on wood, now watch.
Yeah.
We just jinxed ourselves.
Yeah, and also a bridge that'll never come down. I mean, that is the...
you guys like that one,
it's
huh?
a very serious structural element of that project.
Well, what's also interesting about, you mentioned the bridge, is daylighting, right? Because there's a creek under there. We've got to get past daylight, so it's not a solid deck. It's kind of, like a steel type of mesh, if you will, or grid.
Yeah, so that, and so I would say that was a huge part of, and then the invasive species that were a part of the creek, and there was a remediation plan that the village had gone through, and so we mimicked the remediation plan on our side, natural plantings, all of those things, but that's just one of those examples. We also did another project in the village of Lindenhurst where there was a creek where free-flowing water, I think on the banks of that creek, we wound up doing over 40,000 plants, it's like small brush that enabled to maintain the banks and cleaned up the creek where it was originally a concrete culvert, essentially, with shopping carts and ducks and invasive species. So we tried to bring it back and restore the creek bed. In our Bayshore project right now, it's we'll have solar panels on the roof, which will eventually power the interior common areas, and we have at the Ronkonkoma project, which is a 53-acre project, with multiple phases. The entire design is certified LEED for neighborhood development, which is, you know, not LEED like in a building standard, but LEED in its design. So the neighborhood is designed to be walkable. You get extra points for transit. You get points for bikes, that kind of thing. So those are just a few examples.
I have driven around the perimeter of the site. I haven't been in yet. I know it's occupied. People are living there. It's I know still there's more to come, but.
First phase, there's 489 units in the first phase. That's just 6 residential buildings. That is 98% occupied. Then we have phase 2A, which we're building right now, 388 units, 70,000 square feet of retail space, and then 16,500 square feet of office space, which TRITEC is now moving its office to next April. But I think one of the important parts about, from an environmental perspective, the entire project there, we put a 1.5 million gallon per day sewage treatment capacity into the area. So the overall project only uses 450,000 gallons of capacity. So then frees up 1.5 million gallons of capacity for other people to tap into. So that can create not only a lot of economic development, but also, you know, is much better for the environment.
Oh, yeah. Well, you did touch on something that, you know, it's near and dear to us at PW Grosser. It's you mentioned the sustainable energy with the solar panels.
Mm-hmm.
You guys looking at any other alternative sources of energy for any of your sites? Maybe wind or geothermal or, you know, batteries, anything?
We have, I think we do, every time we do a project, you know, these are large scale projects. So anytime you do a project like that, we go through the exercise of, you know, how can we make it more sustainable? What do we have as options that we can use, considering the obstacles of the site, considering the obstacles of finance, considering all of those obstacles, and then, you know, knowing that you have to transition, you know. So our Bayshore project is all electric except for the 1,650 square feet of retail space that we have on the corner. So all of the units and everything like that are all electric, where in Ronkonkoma, with all the retail we have there, it is gas. But yeah, every project we look at, so we did that analysis, tried to figure out what was going to work best for our tenants, for our, you know, for the property itself, for the environment, and then, you know, that's how we come up with the goals.
You guys do anything for EV, electric vehicles? Any charging stations at any of your new sites?
We do. We have
fantastic.
We have the ability to, I think, go up to 20% of our parking spaces could be EV charging. So they're set up to be. I think we start out with somewhere around 5%, and then it'll depend on the tenant mix and the demand. So yeah, we do that. You know, we've been doing it. And
oh man, good things are happening here. This is really interesting. I didn't know that. Did we do that at the shipyard?
We did not, but at the time, you know, the electric vehicles weren't as popular.
Yeah,
and I know
it's taking off now.
Yeah, and Long Island is, I think, has the highest percentage of electric vehicles in the state. I think I've heard that statistic recently. So, you know, we're trying to match the demand of our tenants and what they come to the property with. So a lot of electric vehicle charging stations.
Yeah, well, speaking of Long Island, right? On Long Island, getting project approvals is difficult. It's on a good day, it's difficult, right?
Yes.
The most difficult may be getting approval from the community where a project is targeted. You know, what is it about TRITEC's approach that has allowed it for its success? I mean, I imagine these projects require the application of SECRA and SHPO and all that stuff, but you know, how do you guys engage the community? How do you get them to buy in, or, you know, what, and really reach out to them and understand what they're looking for?
I think we learned a lot going through the Patchogue project. At inception, when Mayor Panieri invited us in, he gave us a book of the history of the town, the village, and said, you need to learn who we are before you can tell us who we're going to be. So we read the book and we learned a lot about the history of Patchogue Village. And then the history was reflected in the design. So if you look at historical photos, you can find, relevant architecture inside the historical photos into what is New Village today. We tried to tap into the history internally. We hired local artists, but that's all post-construction. I think we went and met with all of the community groups to find out what was important to them and seeing how we can incorporate those, relevant, important details into the project, and worked with them through the process. And the process takes a long time, so you have a little bit of an opportunity to work with people. And, you worked with us on the shipyard project. Shipyard, named Shipyard because Port Jefferson used to be a shipbuilding community and, an actual shipyard. And then when you come into the project, you have these murals of what the harbor used to look like.
Oh, yeah. It's incredible.
The walking path that goes down into the village has ballast stones from ships that, when they weighed the ships down to get them out into the harbor. We have, we mimic the deck of the last ship built in Port Jefferson is the ceiling grid for our lobby entrance. We did the same thing in Lindenhurst. In Lindenhurst, when we built the well, when we took the buildings that were there, they were like 80 and 90-year-old industrial buildings, but they kind of had a lot of asbestos and things like that you couldn't save. But they had these old boiler doors that were they're cast iron boiler doors made in Wellsville, New York. That's not why we named it the Well, but it's just a lucky coincidence, So we saved them. When we demoed the building, we saved them, hung on to them for 2 years, and then put them back up and mounted them as like an artistic piece with these green walls. So we always try to go back into the history of where we're building or what's being built, and then tie it into the project's future. So that's.
I mean, Chris, that's worked well. I mean, what you guys said about the village of Patchogue. I've lived nearby, so I see that on a routine basis. I've driven through. I've been in there. It's integrated very well into the village, in my opinion. I mean, it was phenomenal what you guys did.
Yeah.
And I know the mayor is very happy.
Well, he was a great partner, and I think that's another part of it is creating those partnerships.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of leading into our next topic or question here. Many of your projects focus on revitalization, or the creation of downtowns. And as I just said, I believe one of the most well-known ones is New Village in Patchogue. What are some of your qualifying criteria when you guys are looking at new opportunities? What do you look for?
I think being around transit is important. So that could mean a lot of different things. In Port Jefferson, we were at the mouth of the village, but we're only steps away from the ferry to Connecticut. So in Ronkonkoma, we're immediately on the train station. We built in Lindenhurst. It was immediately on the train station. In Patchogue, it's about, I think, 1,500 feet.
It's not far.
It's 1,500 feet.
So short walk, yeah.
And transit's important for a lot of reasons. And, pre-COVID, we all started to look, and I know you guys did this too, at all these empty parking lots. And you said, look at all the technologies that are coming. There's ride sharing. There's a lot of reasons why these parking lots are going to one day be obsolete. And then COVID happened, and everyone's lives changed, and not everybody went to work 5 days a week. And so I think that decelerated an important change in the built environment, because having all these parking lots and asphalt and things that where the sun attracts and the road runoff isn't done properly, especially on older properties, Those things I think will eventually change. We'll get back on track, and there'll be less carbon emissions, and what do they call it? The heat island effect. That'll
you got it.
Yeah, that'll start to. We'll start to be able to do things to minimize those things, those impacts. And if you look at our project that we did together in the shipyard, originally that driveway, impervious surface, water hit it, no way to collect it or drain it, and then it rolled directly down
Guess
to where
it's going.
Yeah, to the Brookhaven boat launch.
Yep.
So, I think on that site we were able to retain somewhere around 8 inches of water.
Oh yeah.
Which is that's a pretty serious amount of water.
Why, knock on wood, the garage hasn't flooded yet.
But, that level of design going into new projects makes a difference in the environment later on.
I want to thank everyone today for listening. That was the first half of a 2-part podcast, and please stay tuned for part 2, which is coming up soon.